book club. All right, give me 1 sec. I need to adjust this before I do anything. Okay. Hi. All right, so let me make sure this is all connected properly. Something doesn't sound right. Okay, perfect. Hi. Okay, is everybody able to hear me good? Sorry, the microphone sounds weird tonight. Also, too, it's very windy here, so I'm hearing the wind, so I'm not sure. I'm just making sure I sound okay. Just let me know if I sound okay. All right. Okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, let me get moderator. Why isn't that working? Okay, for some reason, it's not... Instagram is being very difficult this evening. All right, Jen, I'm going to add you as a moderator. All right, sorry. Instagram Live is being very difficult this evening for some reason. It's super windy in New York City as well. I'll tell you what, I'm in Pittsburgh right now. It's very windy, and we just drove home today from Detroit, and we drove through a snowstorm. So that was particularly unpleasant, if you can imagine. But I'm glad to be back. It was really only, it was like the last 2 hours of our trip. We drove through literally a blizzard, and I was like, oh, I guess we're getting no autumn this year. So that was wonderful. Also, thank you so much. I appreciate it. But for those of you who have never been here before, my name is Jules, and this evening we'll be continuing Interview with a Vampire. This is Vampire Book Club. Every Monday night we meet at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I read, what would you say, probably about 2 chapters. It's usually about an hour and a half of reading. So if you're interested in staying, you can sit back, treat it like a podcast or an audiobook, and I'm going to read to you some dramatic vampire literature. I will give a few minutes here just to let anybody who wants to get in to start in. I know some people said they were going to join tonight, but before we begin, I did watch the new Frankenstein, which I wanted to discuss. Very good. Fantastic. If you haven't seen it, worth it. Also, too, I'm surprised it was a film that wasn't in the cinema. I'm shocked that it was on Netflix. I understand maybe the Netflix funding really helped, but I feel that was a film that needed to be on the big screen as opposed to just at home. You know what I mean? But I loved every moment of it. You know me, I love a good yearning film with monsters. So I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for being here. But yeah, I love a film that has monsters and yearning, and I wouldn't describe it so much as romantic love. It felt more like I don't know, like Frankenstein was a child and needed like maternal love more than anything. That's how it felt to me, at least. Yes, I also wept at the end of it. I was crying. I was crying as well. But I was shocked too, not to be like this. I was shocked by Jacob Elordi's performance. I was unfamiliar with his game. I didn't realize that he could bring such emotional depth to a character. So that was very, I don't know, shocking for me personally. I've seen him in a couple other things, and you know, he's good in it, obviously. But this was, I thought he just brought such a depth, like an emotional depth to the character that I feel really did the original literature justice. But if you are interested in watching it, I would highly recommend. So, from there, I would like to begin this evening. So last time we read all the way up until the point where, obviously Louis has been turned. Yes, I agree. Especially in the first half where he didn't talk, it was like expression in his eyes and his movements, and it was very, I don't know, like poetic almost without using words. I was shocked. I was very surprised. I think he needs to do more acting that isn't solely based upon his looks, where he's cast as like the, you know, stereotypical like Hollywood old handsome, you know what I mean? But I thought it was fantastic. Anyway, so we're at the point now where Louis has explained to Daniel how he became a vampire. we ended with the point of him saying, that is how I became a vampire. So, the edition I'm reading currently does not have chapters. I will say this, I am on page 35 if you want to read along with me this evening, for whatever reason. But we're going to do about, I would say, I would like to shoot for like 40 pages, but if you're not able to stay the whole time, it will be recorded and uploaded on YouTube, so don't stress. But if everybody's ready, I'm going to go ahead and begin. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the audiobook. All right, here we go. "And there you were," said the boy after a pause, "with another vampire you hated." "But I had to stay with him," answered the vampire. "As I've told you, he had me at a great disadvantage. He hinted there was much I didn't know and must know, and that he alone could tell me. But in fact, the main part of what he did teach me was practical and not so difficult to figure out for oneself. How we might travel, for instance, by ship, having our coffins transported for us, as though they contained the remains of loved ones being sent here or there for burial. How no one would dare open such a coffin, and we might rise from it at night to clean the ship of rats, things of this nature. And then there were the shops and businessmen he knew who admitted us well after hours to outfit us in the finest Paris fashions, and those agents willing to transact financial matters in restaurants and cabarets. And in all of these mundane matters, Lestat was an adequate teacher. What manner of man he'd been in life, I couldn't tell and didn't care. But he was for all appearances of the same class now as myself, which meant little to me, except that it made our lives run a little more smoothly than they might have otherwise. He had impeccable taste, though my library to him was a pile of dust, and he seemed more than once to be infuriated by the sight of my reading a book or writing some observations in a journal. "That mortal nonsense," he would say to me, while at the same time spending so much of my money to splendidly furnish Point du Lac that even I, who cared nothing for the money, was forced to wince. And in entertaining visitors at Point du Lac, those hapless travelers who came up the river road by horseback or carriage begging accommodations for the night, sporting letters of introduction from other planters or officials in New Orleans, to these he was so gentle and polite that it made things far easier for me, who found myself hopelessly locked to him and jarred over and over by his viciousness. "But he didn't harm these men?" asked the boy. "Oh, yes, often he did. But I'll tell you a little secret, if I may, which applies not only to vampires, but to generals, soldiers, and kings. Most of us would rather see somebody die than be the object of rudeness under our roofs. Strange, yes, but very true, I assure you. That Lestat hunted for mortals every night, I knew. But had he been savage and ugly to my family, to my guests, and my slaves, I couldn't have endured it. He was not. He seemed particularly to delight in the visitors. But he said we must spare no expense where our families were concerned, and he seemed to me to push luxury upon his father to an almost ludicrous point. The old blind man must be told constantly how fine and expensive were his bed jackets and robes, and what imported draperies had just been fixed to his bed, and what French and Spanish wines we had in the cellar, and how much the plantation yielded even in bad years when the coast talked of abandoning the indigo production altogether and going into sugar. Sidebar for a moment. I always forget that in this book we don't get too much about Lestat's father. It's the reason why I'm very excited to read The Vampire Lestat with you all. However, reading about his father in that book, I feel really gives an insight as to why Lestat comes off as so pompous and pretentious and like money driven now, because he's trying to prove something to his father. I think he's in this book, at least, especially because his father's like on his deathbed. I think that this shows a lot of how much Lestat is still holding on to that mortality, even though he mocks Louis for it. Anyway, that's my sidebar. But then, at other times, he would bully the old man, as I mentioned. He would erupt in such rage that the old man whimpered like a child. "Don't I take care of you in baronial splendor?" Lestat would shout at him. "Don't I provide for you every want? Stop whining to me about going to church or old friends. Such nonsense. Your old friends are dead. Why don't you die and leave me and my bankroll in peace?" The old man would cry softly that these things meant so little to him in old age. He would have been content on his little farm forever. I wanted often to ask him later, where was this farm? From where did you come to Louisiana? To get some clue to the place where Lestat might have known another vampire. So, especially since he was turned up on... Yes, 100%. Oh, I'm so glad you're here. Thank you. And yes, Henry, I totally agree with you there. But these fits were no more frequent than periods of near obsequious kindness, when Lestat would bring his father supper on a tray and feed him patiently, while talking of the weather and the New Orleans news and the activities of my mother and sister. It was obvious that a great gulf existed between father and son, both in education and refinement. But how it came about, I could not quite guess, and from this whole matter I achieved a somewhat consistent detachment. Existence, as I've said, was possible. There was always the promise behind his mocking smile that he knew great things or terrible things, had commerce with levels of darkness I could not possibly guess at. And all the time he belittled me and attacked me for my love of the senses, my reluctance to kill, and the near swoon which killing could produce in me. He laughed uproariously when I discovered that I could see myself in a mirror, and that crosses had no effect upon me, and would not taunt me with sealed lips when I asked about God or the devil. "I'd like to meet the devil some night," he said once with a malignant smile. "I'd chase him from here to the wilds of the Pacific. I am the devil." And when I was aghast at this, he went into peals of laughter. But what happened was simply that in my distaste for him, I came to ignore and suspect him, and yet to study him with a detached fascination. Sometimes I'd find myself staring at his wrist from which I'd drawn my vampire life, and I would fall into such a stillness that my mind seemed to leave my body, or rather my body to become my mind, and then he would see me and stare at me with a stubborn ignorance of what I felt and longed to know and, reaching over, shake me roughly out of it. I bore this with an overt detachment unknown to me in mortal life, and came to understand this as a part of vampire nature, that I might sit at home at Point du Lac and think for hours of my brother's mortal life and see it short and rounded in unfathomable darkness, understanding now the vain and senseless wasting passion with which I'd mourned his loss and turned on other mortals like a maddened animal. All that confusion was then like dancers frenzied in a fog, and now in this strange vampire nature, I felt a profound sadness. But I did not brood over this. Let me not give you that impression, for brooding would have been to me the most terrible waste. But rather I looked around me at all the mortals that I knew and saw all life as precious, condemning all fruitless guilt and passion that would let it slip through the fingers like sand. It was only now as a vampire that I did come to know my sister, forbidding her the plantation for the city life, which she so needed in order to know her own time of life, and her own beauty, and come to marry, not brood for our lost brother, or my going away, or become a nursemaid for our mother. And I provided for them all they might need or want, finding even the most trivial request worth my immediate attention. My sister laughed at the transformation in me when we would meet at night, and I would take her from our flat out the narrow wooden streets to walk along the tree-lined levee in the moonlight, savoring the orange blossoms and the caressing warmth, talking for hours of her most secret thoughts and dreams, those little fantasies she dared to tell no one, and would even whisper to me when we sat in the dim-lit parlor entirely alone. And I would see her sweet and palpable before me, a shimmering, precious creature soon to grow old, soon to die, soon to lose these moments that in their intangibility promised to us wrongly and immortality. As if it were our very birthright, which we could not come to grasp the meaning of until this time of middle life, when we looked on only as many years ahead as already lay behind us, when every moment must be first known and then savored. It was detachment that made this possible, a sublime loneliness with which Lestat and I moved through the world of mortal men. And all material troubles passed from us. I should tell you the practical nature of it. Lestat had always known how to steal from victims chosen for sumptuous dress and other promising signs of extravagance, but the great problem of shelter and secrecy had been for him a terrible struggle. I suspected that, beneath his gentleman's veneer, he was painfully ignorant of the most simple financial matters. But I was not, and so he could acquire cash at any moment, and I could invest it. If he were not picking the pocket of a dead man in an alley, he was at the greatest gambling tables in the richest salons of the city, using the vampire keenness to suck gold and dollars and deeds of property from young planters' sons, who found him deceptive in his friendship and alluring in his charm. But this had never given him the life he wanted, and so for that he had ushered me into the preternatural worlds, that he might acquire an investor and manager for whom these skills of mortal life became most valuable in life after. But let me describe New Orleans as it was then, and as it was to become, so you can understand how simple our lives were. There was no city in America like New Orleans. It was filled not only with the French and Spanish of all classes, who had formed in part its peculiar aristocracy, but later with immigrants of all kinds, the Irish and the German in particular. Then there were not only the black slaves, yet unhomogenized and fantastical in their different tribal garb and manners, but the great growing class of the free people of color, those marvelous people of our mixed blood and that of the islands, who produced a magnificent and unique cast of craftsmen, artists, poets, and renowned feminine beauty. And then there were the Indians, who covered the levee on summer days, selling herbs and crafted wares, and drifting through this medley of languages and colors were the people of the port, the sailors of ships, who came in great waves to spend their money in the cabarets, to buy for the night this beautiful women, both dark and light, to dine on the best of Spanish and French cooking, and drink the imported wines of the old world. Then add to these, within years after my transformation, the Americans, who built the city up river from the old French quarter with magnificent Grecian houses which gleamed in the moonlight like temples. And, of course, the planters, always the planters, coming to town with their families in shining landaus to buy evening gowns and silver and gems, to crowd the narrow streets on the way to the old French Opera House and the Théâtre d'Orléans and the St. Louis Cathedral, from whose open doors came the chants of high mass over the crowds of the Place des Hommes on Sundays, over the noise and bickering of the French market, over the silent, ghostly drift of the ships along the raised waters of the Mississippi, which flowed against the levee above the ground of New Orleans itself, so that the ships appeared to float against the sky. This was New Orleans, a magical and magnificent place to live, in which a vampire, richly dressed and gracefully walking through the pools of light of one gas lamp after another, might attract no more notice in the evening than hundreds of other exotic creatures. If he attracted any at all, if anyone stopped to whisper behind a fan, "That man, how pale, how he gleams, how he moves! It's not natural!" A city in which a vampire might be gone before the words had even passed the lips, seeking out the alleys in which he could see like a cat, the darkened bars in which sailors slept with their heads on the tables, great high-ceilinged hotel rooms where a lone figure might sit, her feet upon an embroidered cushion, her legs covered with a lace counterpane, her head bent under the tarnished light of a single candle, never seeing the great shadow move across the plaster flowers of the ceiling, never seeing the long white finger reach to press the fragile flame. One sec, I'm going to have a sip of my tea. Sorry, it's very chilly. Remarkable, if for nothing else, because of this, that all of those men and women who stayed for any reason left behind them some monument, some structure of marble and brick and stone that still stands, so that even when the gas lamps went out and the planes came in and the office buildings crowded the blocks of Canal Street, something irreducible of beauty and romance remained. Not in every street, perhaps, but in so many that the landscape is for me the landscape of those times always, and walking now in the starlit streets of the quarter or of the garden district, I am in those times again. I suppose that it is the nature of the monument, be it a small house or a mansion or of Corinthian columns and wrought iron lace. The monument does not say that this or that man walked here. No, that what he felt in one time in one spot continues. The moon that rose over New Orleans then still rises. As long as the monuments stand, it still rises. The feeling, at least here and there, it remains the same. Yes, I'm just being polite. The vampire appeared sad. He sighed, as if he doubted what he had just said. "What is it?" he asked suddenly, as if he were slightly tired. "Yes, money. Lestat and I had to make money." The show was different from the book, but I really enjoyed the new interpretation of Louis' relationship with his family. Yes, you know what, Henry? That's a great point. Because I always found that in the film adaptation with Brad Pitt, obviously, I felt there was a detachment from the original storyline that made that film to me in some ways feel a bit hollow. I love it, don't get me wrong. It's very nostalgic for me. I watched it very early in childhood. I thank my mother for that. But as I became familiar with the actual book, which I had obviously read once I was a little bit older, because this is not a book I was reading when I was 10 by any means. I think I was like 12, I think, when I first read this book. I realized how much storyline was missing from the movie, and I do find that the TV show, albeit they did take liberties, of course, is a bit more cohesive to the source material, and also I think is a little bit, like you said, more, I don't know, it feels more realistic, the dynamic of the family, and I think it flows very well, and that's why, even though it's set a little bit later in time, obviously, and there are some stark differences, I do find that it flows very naturally, or preternaturally. But I completely agree with what you're saying. We continue. "What was it?" he asked suddenly, as if you were slightly tired. "Yes, money. Lestat and I had to make money, and I was telling you that he could steal. But it was investment afterwards that mattered. What we accumulated we must use, but I go ahead of myself. I killed animals, but I'll get to that in a moment. Lestat killed humans all the time, sometimes 2 or 3 a night, sometimes more. He would drink from one just enough to satisfy a momentary thirst, and then go on to another. The better the human, as he would say in his vulgar way, the more he liked it. A fresh young girl was his favorite food the first of the evening, but the triumphant kill for Lestat was a young man. A young man around your age would have appealed to him in particular. "Me?" the boy whispered. He had leaned forward on his elbows to peer into the vampire's eyes, and now he drew up. "Yes," the vampire went on, as if he hadn't observed the boy's change of expression. "You see, they represented the greatest loss to Lestat, because they stood on the threshold of the maximum possibility of life. Of course, Lestat didn't understand this himself. I came to understand it. Lestat understood nothing. I shall give you a perfect example of what Lestat liked. Up the river from us was the Frenier plantation, a magnificent spread of land which had great hopes of making a fortune in sugar just shortly after the refining process had been invented. I presume you know sugar was refined in Louisiana. There is something perfect and ironic about it, this land which I loved producing refined sugar. I mean, this is more unhappily than I think you know. This refined sugar is a poison. It was like the essence of life in New Orleans, so sweet that it can be fatal, so richly enticing that all other values are forgotten. But as I was saying, upriver from us lived the Freniers, a great old French family which had produced in this generation 5 young women and 1 young man. Now, 3 of the young women were destined not to marry, but 2 were young enough still, and all depended upon the young man. He was to manage the plantation, as I had done for my mother and sister. He was to negotiate marriages, to put together dowries when the entire fortune of the place rode precariously on the next year's sugar crop. He was to bargain, fight, and keep at a distance the entire material world for the world of the Frenier. Lestat decided he wanted him. And when fate alone nearly cheated Lestat, he went wild. He risked his own life to get the Frenier boy, who had become involved into a duel. I forgot about this part. He had insulted a young Spanish Creole at a ball. The whole thing was nothing, really, but like most young Creoles, this one was willing to die for nothing. They were both willing to die for nothing. The Frenier household was in an uproar. You must understand, Lestat knew this perfectly. Both of us had hunted the Frenier plantation, Lestat for slaves and chicken thieves, and me for animals. You were killing only animals? Yes, but I'll come to that later, as I said. We both knew the plantation, and I had indulged in one of the greatest pleasures of a vampire, that of watching people unbeknownst to them. Peeping Tom is the preferred activity of vampires, apparently. Also, excuse me, my septum is like so cold right now. Darling, if you're watching this, can you bring me a tissue, please? I knew the Frenier sisters as I knew the magnificent rose trees around my brother's oratory. They were a unique group of women. Each in her own way was as smart as the brother, and one of them, I shall call her Babette, was not only as smart as her brother, but far wiser. Yet none had been educated to care for the plantation. None understood even the simplest facts about its financial state. All were totally dependent upon young Frenier, and all knew it. And so sorry, my tissue delivery is here. Thank you so much. Oh my goodness. No, it's okay. Thank you so much. It's chilly. Oh, yeah. Sorry, everybody. It's so cold. It's very cold here.
Do you want a second one? Just in case?
No, it's okay. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to leave these here.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, darling. I love you. Sorry, everybody. I love you. Sorry, my nose is running. It's like Baltic right now here, and it's so chilly in our office. Give me one sec. Perks of having a husband that likes to listen to you read, I suppose. All right, let's see. We shall continue. All right. And so, larded with their love for him, their passionate belief that he hung the moon, and that any conjugal love they might ever know would only be a pale reflection of their love for him, larded with this was a desperation as strong as the will to survive. If Frenier died in the duel, the plantation would collapse. Its fragile economy, a life of splendor based on the perennial mortgaging of the next year's crop, was in his hands alone. So you can imagine the panic and misery in the Frenier household that night that the son went to town to fight the appointed duel. And now picture Lestat gnashing his teeth like a comic opera devil because he was not going to kill the young Frenier. You mean, then, that you felt for the Frenier women? I felt for them totally, said the vampire. Their position was agonizing, and I felt for the boy. That night he locked himself in his father's study and made a will. He knew full well that if he fell under the rapier at 4 a.m. the next morning, his family would fall with him. He deplored his situation and yet could do nothing to help it. So to run out on the duel would not only mean social ruin for him, but would probably have been impossible. The other young man would have pursued him until he was forced to fight. Also, I cannot relate to this. Could you imagine? I could not imagine also as well. I can't picture the dynamic of the family where all of the sisters, like their love for their brother supersedes their like longing for a romantic relationship. That just seems very odd and like borderline incestuous to me. I don't know. I could not be me. I cannot relate. Couldn't be me. But anyway. When he left the plantation at midnight, he was staring into the face of death itself with the character of a man who, having only one path to follow, has resolved to follow it with perfect courage. He would either kill the Spanish boy or die. It was unpredictable, despite all his skill. His face reflected a depth of feeling and wisdom I'd never seen on the face of any of Lestat's struggling victims. I had my first battle with Lestat then and there. I prevented him from killing the boy for months, and now he meant to kill him before the Spanish boy could. We were on horseback racing after young Frenier towards New Orleans. Yeah, you're right. That's the 1700s. Couldn't relate. Lestat bent on overtaking him. I bent on overtaking Lestat. Well, the duel, as I told you, was scheduled for 4 a.m. on the edge of the swamp just beyond the city's northern gate, and arriving there just shortly before 4, we had precious little time to return to Point du Lac, which meant our own lives were in danger. I was incensed at Lestat as never before, and he was determined to get the boy. Give him his chance, I was insisting, getting a hold of Lestat before he could approach the boy. It was midwinter, bitter cold, and damp in the swamps, one volley of icy rain after another sweeping the clearing where the duel was to be fought. Suddenly thankful for my own bank account. Yeah, you and me both. Right? Also, suddenly thankful I am the oldest daughter. I don't have to worry about these things. Of course, I did not fear these elements in the sense that you might. Also, hello, Seth. I see you just joined. I love you dearly. Oh, I love you. Thank you for being here. I love you so much. Of course, I did not fear these elements in the sense that you might. They did not numb me nor threaten me with mortal shivering or illness, but vampires feel cold as acutely as humans, and the blood of the kill is often the rich, sensual alleviation of that cold. But what concerned me that morning was not the pain I felt, but the excellent cover of darkness these elements provided, which made Frenier extremely vulnerable to Lestat's attack. All he need do would be step away from his two friends towards the swamp, and Lestat might take him. And so I physically grappled with Lestat. I held him. But towards all this, you had detachment, distance? The vampire sighed. Yes, I had it, and with it a supremely resolute anger. To glut himself upon the life of an entire family was, to me, Lestat's supreme act of utter contempt and disregard for all he should have seen with a vampire's depth. So I held him in the dark, where he spit at me and cursed at me, and young Frenier took his rapier from his friend and went out on the slick, wet grass to meet his opponent. There was a brief conversation, then the duel commenced. Duolingo's yelling at me. It's only 9:30. Duolingo's yelling at me that I'm going to miss my my lesson for the night. Relax, you owl fiend. Anyway, there was a brief conversation, then the duel commenced. In moments it was over. Frenier had mortally wounded the other boy with a swift thrust to the chest, and he knelt in the grass, bleeding, dying, shouting something unintelligible at Frenier. The victor simply stood there. Everyone could see there was no sweetness in the victory. Frenier looked on death as it were an abomination. His companions advanced with their lanterns, urging him to come away as soon as possible, and leave the dying man to his friends. Meantime, the wounded one would allow no one to touch him. Probably pride. And then as Frenier's group turned to go, the three of them walking heavily towards their horses, the man on the ground drew a pistol. Perhaps I alone could see this in the powerful dark, but in any event I shouted to Frenier as I ran towards the gun. And this was all Lestat needed. While I was lost in my clumsiness, distracting Frenier and going for the gun itself, Lestat, with his years of experience and superior speed, grabbed the young man and spirited him into the cypresses. I doubt his friends even knew what had happened. The pistol had gone off, the wounded man collapsed, and I was tearing through the near-frozen marshes shouting for Lestat. Then I saw him. Frenier lay sprawled over the knobbed roots of a cypress, his boots deep in the murky water, and Lestat was still bent over him, one hand on the hand of Frenier that still held the foil. I went to pull Lestat off, and that right hand swung at me with such lightning speed I did not see it, did not know it had struck me until I found myself in the water also, and, of course, by the time I recovered, Frenier was dead. I saw him as he lay there, his eyes closed, his lips utterly still, as if he were just sleeping. "Damn you!" I began cursing Lestat, and then I started, for the body of Frenier had begun to slip down into the march. The water rose over his face and covered him completely. Lestat was jubilant. I think of Jubilee every time I say that word. Jubilant. He reminded me tersely. I've never really used that word before. I'm gonna use that in my vocabulary now. He reminded me tersely that we had less than an hour to get back to Point du Lac, and he swore revenge on me. "If I didn't like the life of a southern planter, I'd finish you tonight. I know a way," he threatened me. "I ought to drive your horse into the swamps. You'd have to dig yourself a hole and smother," he rode off. Even over all these years, I feel that anger for him, like a white-hot liquid filling my veins. I saw then what being a vampire meant to him. "He was just a killer," the boy said, his voice reflecting some of the vampire's emotion. "No regard for anything." No. Being a vampire for him meant revenge. Revenge against life itself. Every time he took a life, it was revenge. It was no wonder then that he appreciated nothing. The nuances of vampire existence weren't even available to him because he was focused with a maniacal vengeance upon the mortal life he'd left. Consumed with hatred, he looked back. Consumed with envy, nothing pleased him unless he could take it from others, and once having it, he grew cold and dissatisfied, not loving the thing for itself, and so he went after something else. Vengeance, blind and sterile and contemptible. But I've spoken to you about the Frenier sisters. It was almost 5:30 when I reached their plantation. Dawn would come shortly after 6, but I was almost home. I slipped onto the upper gallery of the house and saw them all gathered in the parlor. They had never even dressed for bed. Their candles burnt low, and they sat already as mourners waiting for the word. They were all dressed in black, as was their at-home custom, and in the dark the black shapes of their dresses massed together, with their raven hair, so that in the glow of the candles their faces appeared as 5 soft, shimmering apparitions. Each uniquely sad, each uniquely courageous. Babette's face alone appeared resolute. It was as if she had already made up her mind to take the burdens of Frenier if her brother died. And she had that same expression on her face now, which had been on her brother's when he mounted to leave for the duel. What lay ahead of her was nearly impossible. What lay ahead was the final death of which Lestat was guilty. So I did something then which caused me great risk. I made myself known to her. I did this by playing the light. As you can see, my face is very white and has a smooth, highly reflective surface, rather like that of polished marble. "Yes," the boy nodded, and appeared flustered. "It's very beautiful, actually," said the boy. "I wonder if... But what happened?" "You wonder if I was a handsome man when I was alive," said the vampire. The boy nodded. "I was. Nothing structurally has changed in me, only I never knew that I was handsome. Life whirled about me, a wind of petty concerns, as I've said. I gazed at nothing, not even a mirror, especially not a mirror, with a free eye. But this is what happened. I stepped near to the pane of glass and let the light touch my face, and this I did at a moment when Babette's eyes were turned towards the panes. Then I appropriately vanished. Within seconds, all the sisters knew a, quote, strange creature had been seen, a ghost-like creature, and the two enslaved maids steadfastly refused to investigate. I waited out these moments impatiently for just that which I wanted to happen. Babette finally took a candelabrum from a side table, lit the candles, and, scorning everyone's fear, ventured out onto the cold gallery alone to see what was there. Her sisters hovering in the door like great black birds, one of them crying that the brother was dead, and she had indeed seen his ghost. Of course, you must understand that Babette, being as strong as she was, never once attributed what she saw to imagination or to ghosts. I let her come the length of the dark gallery before I spoke to her, and even then I let her see only the vague outline of my body beside one of the columns. "Tell your sisters to go back," I whispered to her. "I come to tell you of your brother. Do as I say." She was still for an instant, and then she turned to me and strained to see me in the dark. "I have only a little time. I would not harm you for the world," I said, and she obeyed. Saying it was nothing, she told them to shut the door, and they obeyed as people obey who not only need a leader, but are desperate for one. Then I stepped into the light of Babette's candles. The boy's eyes were wide. He put his hand to his lips. "Did you look to her, as you looked to me?" he asked. "You asked that with such innocence," said the vampire. "Yes, I suppose I certainly did. Only by candlelight I always had a less supernatural appearance, and I made no pretense with her of being an ordinary creature. I have only minutes," I told her at once, "but what I have to tell you is of the greatest importance. Your brother fought bravely and won the duel, but wait. You must know, now, he is dead. Death was proverbial with him, the thief in the night about which all his goodness or courage could do nothing. But this is not the principal thing which I came to tell you. It is this: you can rule the plantation, and you can save it. All that is required is that you let no one convince you otherwise. You must assume his position despite any outcry, any talk of convention, any talk of propriety, or common sense. You must listen to nothing. The same land is here now that was here yesterday morning when your brother slept above. Nothing is changed. You must take his place. If you do not, the land is lost and the family is lost. You'll be 5 women on a small pension, doomed to live but half or it's a weird way to write that. Doomed to live but half or less of what life could give you. Learn what you must know. Stop at nothing until you have the answers, and take my visitation to you to be your courage whenever you waver. You must take the reins of your own life. Your brother is dead." I could see by her face that she had heard every word. She would have questioned me had there been time, but she believed me when I said there was not. Then I used all my skill to leave her so swiftly I appeared to vanish. From the garden I saw her face above in the glow of her candles. I saw her search the dark for me, turning around, and then I saw her make the sign of the cross and walk back to her sisters within. The vampire smiled. There was absolutely no talk on the river coast of any strange apparition to Babette Frenier, but after the first mourning and sad talk of the women left all alone, she became the scandal of the neighborhood because she chose to run the plantation on her own. She managed an immense dowry for her younger sister, and was married herself in another year, and Lestat and I almost never exchanged words. Did he go on living at Pointe du Lac? Yes. I could not be certain he told me all I needed to know, and great pretense was necessary. My sister was married in my absence, for example, while I had a malarial chill, and something similar overcame me the morning of my mother's funeral. Meantime, Lestat and I sat down to dinner each night with the old man and made nice noises with our knives and forks, while he told us to eat everything on our plates and not to drink our wine too fast. With dozens of miserable headaches, I would receive my sister in a darkened bedroom. the covers up to my chin, bid her and her husband bear with the dim light on account of the pain in my eyes, as I entrusted to them large amounts of money to invest for all of us. Fortunately, her husband was an idiot, a harmless one, but an idiot, the product of 4 generations of marriages between first cousins. Ooh, that's a burn. But though these things went well, we began to have our problems with the enslaved. They were suspicious of us, and, as I've indicated, Lestat killed anyone and everyone he chose. So there was always some talk of mysterious death on that part of the coast, but it was what they saw of us which began the talk. And I heard it one evening when I was playing a shadow about the enslaved cabins. Now let me explain first the character of these enslaved. It was only about 1795, Lestat and I having lived there for 4 years in relative quiet, I investing the money which he acquired, increasing our lands, purchasing apartments and townhouses in New Orleans, which I rented, the work of the plantation itself producing little. More a cover for us than an investment. I say our. This is wrong. I never signed anything over to Lestat, and, as you realize, I was still legally alive. But in 1795, these enslaved did not have the character which you've seen in films and novels in the South. They were not soft-spoken, brown-skinned people in drab rags who spoke an English dialect. They were Africans, and they were islanders. That is, some of them had come from Santo Domingo. They were very black and totally foreign. They spoke in their African tongues, and they spoke the French patois, and when they sang African songs which made the fields exotic and strange, always frightening to me in my mortal life. They were superstitious, and they had their own secrets and traditions. In short, they had not yet been destroyed as Africans completely. Slavery was the curse of their existence, but they had not been robbed yet of that which had been characteristically theirs. They tolerated the baptism and modest garments imposed on them by the French Catholic laws. Oh, that was weird. Audio just went out. But in the evenings, they made their cheap fabrics into alluring costumes, made jewelry of animal bones and bits of discarded metal which they polished to look like gold, and the slave cabins of Pointe du Lac were a foreign country, an African coast after dark, in which not even the coldest overseer would want to wander. No fear for the vampire. Not until one summer evening when, passing for a shadow, I heard through the open doors of the foreman's cottage a conversation which convinced me that Lestat and I slept in real danger. The enslaved knew now we were not ordinary mortals. In hushed tone... Why does this... Yeah. Hang on one second. This keeps going out. Give me 1 second. Just check everything, make sure. For some reason, it's going out in my headphones too. That's why I was like, this is weird. Let's just hope it stays normal. Okay. If it does it again, I'm just going to take the microphone out and we'll just read au naturel. Okay, let's see. Okay. In hushed tones, the maids told of how, through a crack in the door, they had seen us dine on empty plates with empty silver, lifting empty glasses. It's my robotic side, yes. I just started doing the robot. They had seen us dine on empty plates with empty silver, lifting empty glasses to our lips, laughing, our faces bleached and ghostly in the candlelight, the blind man a helpless fool in our power. Through keyholes they had seen Lestat's coffin, and once he had beaten one of them mercilessly for dawdling by the gallery windows of his room. "There is no bed in there," they confided one to the other with nodding heads. "He sleeps in the coffin, I know it." They were convinced, on the best of grounds, of what we were. And as for me, they'd seen me evening after evening emerge from the oratory, which was now little more than a shapeless mass of brick and vine, layered with flowering wisteria in the spring, wild roses in summer, moss gleaming on the old unpainted shutters which had never been opened, spiders spinning in their stone arches. Of course, I'd pretended to visit it in memory of Paul, but it was clear by their speech they no longer believed such lies. And now they attributed to us not only the deaths of the enslaved found in the fields and swamps, and also the dead cattle and occasional horses, but all other strange events. Even floods and thunder were the weapons of God in a personal battle waged with Louis and Lestat. But worse still, they were not planning to run away. We were devils, our power inescapable. No, we must be destroyed. And at this gathering, where I became an unseen member, were a number of the Frenier enslaved. This meant word would get to the entire coast, and though I firmly believe the entire coast to be impervious to a wave of hysteria, I did not intend to risk notice of any kind. I hurried back to the plantation house to tell Lestat our game of playing planter was over. He'd have to give up his enslaved whip and golden napkin ring and move into town. He resisted, naturally. His father was gravely ill and might not live. He had no intention of running away from the enslaved. It's terrible. This always makes me uncomfortable reading this parts because Lestat seems like such a piece of shit in this, and I'm just like, ugh. It's yucky. "I'll kill them all," he said kindly. "In 3s and 4s. Some will run away, and that will be fine." "You're talking madness. The fact is, I want you gone from here." "You want me gone? You," he sneered. He was building a card palace on the dining room table with a pack of very fine French cards. "You whining coward of a vampire who prowls the night killing alley cats and rats and staring for hours at candles as if they were people and standing in the rain like a zombie until your clothes are drenched and you smell like old wardrobe trunks in attics and have the look of a baffled idiot at the zoo." "You've nothing more to tell me, and your insistence on recklessness has endangered us both. I might live in that oratory alone with this house, while this house fell to ruin. I don't care about it," I told him, because this was quite true. "But you must have all the things you never had of life and make of immortality a junk shop in which both of us become grotesque. Now, go look at your father and tell me how long he has to live, for that's how long you stay, and only if the enslaved don't rise up against us." He told me then to go look at his father myself, since I was the one who was always looking, and I did. The old man was truly dying. I had been spared my mother's death, more or less, because she had died very suddenly on an afternoon. She'd been found with her sewing basket, seated quietly in the courtyard. She had died as one goes to sleep. But now I was seeing a natural death that was too slow with agony and with consciousness. And I'd always liked the old man. He was kindly and simple and made few demands. By day, he sat in the sun of the gallery, dozing and listening to the birds. By night, any chatter on our part kept him company. He could play chess, carefully feeling each piece and remembering the entire state of the board with remarkable accuracy. And though Lestat would never play with him, I did often. Now he lay gasping for breath, his forehead hot and wet, the pillows around him stained with sweat, and as he moaned and prayed for death, Lestat in the other room began to play the spinet. I slammed it shut, barely missing his fingers. "You won't play while he dies," I said. "The hell I won't," he answered me. "I'll play the drum if I like." And taking a great sterling silver platter from a sideboard, he slipped his finger through one of its handles and beat it with a spoon. I told him to stop it, or I would make him stop it, and then we both ceased our noise because the old man was calling his name. He was saying that he must talk to Lestat now before he died. I told Lestat to go to him. The sound of his crying was terrible. "Why should I? I've cared for him all these years. Isn't that enough?" And he drew from his pocket a nail file and, seating himself on the foot of the old man's bed, he began to file his long nails. Meantime, I should tell you that I was aware of the enslaved about the house. They were watching and listening. I was truly hoping the old man would die within minutes. Once or twice before I've dealt with suspicion or doubt on the part of several enslaved, but never such a number. I immediately rang for Daniel, the enslaved to whom I'd given the overseer's house and position. But while I waited for him, I could hear the old man talking to Lestat. Lestat, who sat with his legs crossed, filing and filing, one eyebrow arched, his attention on his perfect nails. "It was the school," the old man was saying. "Oh, I know you remember. What can I say to you?" he moaned. "You'd better say it," Lestat said, "because you're about to die." The old man let out a terrible noise, and I suspect I made some sound of my own. I positively loathed Lestat. I had a mind now to get him out of the room. "Well, you know what? You know that, don't you? Even a fool like you knows that," said Lestat. "You'll never forgive me, will you?" "Not now, not even after I'm dead," said the old man. "I don't know what you're talking about," said Lestat. My patience was becoming exhausted with him, and the old man was becoming more and more agitated. One moment, let's see. I like how strangely vampires are described in the book. The reflective skin and hands that could not belong to a human being gives a very different image than what... Yes, I agree. Yeah. I think it's fascinating, too, because, even though, obviously, for those of you who have read Anne Rice's books, they are very, I don't want to say romanticized is not the right word. I think she was going for something that was, beautiful, but also, very creature-esque in some ways too, especially because they talk a lot about some vampires being completely devoid and bereft of humanity. The way she writes them, though, I think it really paints this picture of, wow, they look so not natural as compared to other vampire literature where it's they're just these beautiful creatures and people are mesmerized by them. In her books, under the right circumstances, in the right light, a lot of these people would be afraid of them. A lot of humans would be afraid of them. Even though they're drawn in by their beauty, they are still terrified because something looks uncanny valley would maybe be the right way to describe it. Also, good evening. All right, let me just have a sip of tea real quick. He was begging Lestat to listen to him with a warm heart. The whole thing was making me shudder. Meantime, Daniel had come, and I knew that moment I saw him that everything at Point du Lac was lost. Yes, unearthly beauty, but terrifying. I agree. Had I been more attentive, I'd have seen the signs of it before now. He looked at me with eyes of glass. I was a monster to him. "Monsieur Lestat's father is very ill. Going," I said, ignoring his expression. "I want no noise tonight. The enslaved must all stay within the cabins. A doctor is on his way." He stared at me as if I were lying, and then his eyes moved curiously and coldly away from me towards the old man's door. His face underwent such a change that I rose at once and looked in the room. It was Lestat, slouched at the foot of the bed, his back on the bedpost, his nail file working furiously, grimacing in such a way that both his great teeth showed prominently. The vampire stopped, his shoulders shaking with silent laughter. He was looking at the boy, and the boy looked shyly at the table, but he had already looked and fixedly at the vampire's mouth. He had seen that the lips were made of a different texture from the vampire's skin, that they were silken and delicately lined like any person's lips, only deadly white, and he had glimpsed the white teeth. Only the vampire had such a way of smiling that they were not completely revealed, and the boy had not even thought of such teeth until now. "You can imagine," said the vampire, "what this meant. I had to kill him." "You what?" said the boy. Is the Vampire Book Club merch again? I was here for the very first show, but you know what? I would absolutely love to do that. I want to get back in the swing of doing it, and I'd also like to get back in the swing of actually posting content again, like silly content. I figured the world is burning. Why not, become silly and out there again and make everybody laugh. So eventually, yes, there will be. My darling husband has come up with a couple designs for me that are fabulous. I love them so much. So eventually I would like that. I'd like to do t-shirts. Again, that would be really nice. I also would really love to do, at minimum, bookmarks would be fabulous. Because I think that's quite fitting. So yes, eventually there will be. I'm going to say probably after the holidays is when we're going to shoot to do that. This is just a very crazy time right now. So probably after the holidays we'll do it again. Thank you for asking. I'm sorry that you were not able to get them in Canada. I never got it because I'm in Canada and got lost in transit. Oh, God. I'm so sorry. You know, it's so funny. Sidebar. This happened a couple of times, actually. Not just with the merch, but when I shipped out packages, a lot of them didn't even get returned to me when we checked the tracking. Once they got to Air Canada, they were lost entirely. Or I would get a notification that they were undeliverable for whatever reason. But I apologize. And thank you, Jen. I love you. You are amazing and wonderful. But yes, we will do something again once the holidays are over, for sure. Okay, here we go. I had to kill him. He started to run. He would have alarmed everyone. Perhaps it might have been handled some other way, but I had no time. So I went after him, overpowering him. But then, finding myself in the act of doing what I had not done for 4 years, I stopped. This was a man. He had his bone-handled knife in his hand to defend himself, and I took it from him easily and slipped into his heart. He sank to his knees at once. Let's see. Yes, a bookmark is the best idea. No problem. I had a middleman. Oh, I see. That makes sense. I remember discussing this with you. I think I had spoken to you probably about it a year and a half ago now. Oh, that was weird. Oh, what just happened? 1 second. Why did it just do that? Why did it just change like that? I'm so sorry, everyone. Give me 1 second. Why did it just change like that? Oh, I figured it out. Grandma figured it out, so don't worry. Instagram's format is very different from when we were doing this previously. Anyway. Okay. Here we go. Back to where we were. Okay, so and I took it from him easily and slipped it into his heart. He sank to his knees at once, his fingers tightening on the blade, bleeding on it, and the sight of the blood, the aroma of it, maddened me. Yeah, Mercury strikes again, you're right. I believe I moaned aloud, but I did not reach for him. I would not. Then I remember seeing Lestat's figure emerge in the mirror over the sideboard. "Why did you do this?" he demanded. I turned to face him, determined he would not see me in this weakened state. The old man was delirious. He went on. He could not understand what the old man was saying. "The enslaved, they know. You must go to the cabins and keep watch," I managed to say to him. "I'll care for the old man." "Kill him," Lestat said. "Are you mad?" I answered. "He's your father." "I know he's my father," said Lestat. "That's why you have to kill him. I can't kill him. If I could, I would have done it a long time ago. Damn him." He wrung his hands. "We've got to get out of here, and look what you've done, killing this one. There's no time to lose. His wife will be wailing up here in minutes, or she'll send someone worse." The vampire sighed. This was all true. Lestat was right. I could hear the enslaved gathering around Daniel's cottage, waiting for him. Daniel had been brave enough to come into the haunted house alone. When he didn't return, the enslaved would panic, become a mob. I told Lestat to calm them, to use all his power as a white master over them, and to not alarm them with horror, and then I went into the bedroom and shut the door. I had then another shock in a night of shocks, because I'd never seen Lestat's father as he was then. He was sitting up now, leaning forward, talking to Lestat, begging Lestat to answer him, telling him he understood his bitterness better than Lestat did himself. And he was a living corpse. Nothing animated his sunken body but a fierce will. Hence his eyes, for their gleam, were all the more sunken in his skull. That's sad. And his lips, and their trembling, made the old yellowed mouth more horrible. I sat at the foot of the bed, and, suffering to see him so, I gave him my hand. I cannot tell you how much his appearance had shaken me, for when I bring death, it is swift and conscienceless, leaving the victim as if in an enchanted sleep. But this was the slow decay, the body refusing to surrender to the vampire of time, which had sucked upon it for years on end. "Lestat," he said, "just for once, don't be hard with me. Just for once, be for me the boy you were, my son." He said this over and over, the words, my son, and then he said something I could not hear about innocence and innocence destroyed, but I could see that he was not out of his mind, as Lestat thought, but in some terrible state of lucidity. The burden of the past was on him with full force, and the present, which was only death, which he fought with all his will, could do nothing to soften that burden. But I knew I might deceive him if I used all my skill, and, bending close to him now, I whispered the word, "Father." It was not Lestat's voice, it was mine, a soft whisper. But he calmed at once, and I thought then he might die. But he held my hand as if he were being pulled under by dark ocean waves, and I alone could save him. He talked now of some country teacher, a name garbled, who found in Lestat a great, brilliant pupil and begged to take him to a monastery for an education. He cursed himself for bringing Lestat home, for burning his books. "You must forgive me, Lestat," he cried. I pressed his hand tightly, hoping this might do for some answer, but he repeated this again. "You have it all to live for, but you are as cold and brutal as I was then, with the work always there, and the cold and hunger. Lestat, you must remember, you were the gentlest of them all. God will forgive me if you forgive me." Well, at that moment, the real Esau came through the door. I gestured for quiet, but he wouldn't see that, so I had to get up quickly so the father wouldn't hear his voice from a distance. The enslaved had run from him. "But they're out there. They're gathered in the dark. I hear them," said Lestat. And then he glared at the old man. "Kill him, Louis," he said to me, his voice touched with the first pleading I'd ever heard in it. Then he bit down in rage. "Do it! Lean over that pillow and tell him you forgive him all. Forgive him for taking you out of school when you were a boy. Tell him that now." "For what?" Lestat grimaced, so that his face looked like a skull. "Taking me out of school?" He threw up his hands and let out a terrible roar of desperation. "Damn him! Kill him!" he said. "No," I said. "You forgive him, or you kill him yourself. Go on, kill your own father." The old man begged to be told what we were saying. He called out, "Son, son," and Lestat danced like the maddened Rumpelstiltskin about to put his foot through the floor. I went to the lace curtains. I could see and hear the enslaved surrounding the house of Point du Lac, forms woven in the shadows drawing near. "You were Joseph among your brothers," the old man said, "the best of them. But how was I to know? It was when you were gone I knew, when all those years passed, and they could offer me no comfort, no solace. And then you came back to me and took me from the farm. But it wasn't you. It wasn't the same boy." I turned on Lestat now and veritably dragged him towards the bed. Never had I seen him so weak and at the same time enraged. He shook me off and then knelt down near the pillow, glowering at me. I stood resolute and whispered, "Forgive." "It's all right, father. You must rest easy. I hold nothing against you," his voice thin and strained over his anger. The old man turned on the pillow, murmuring something soft with relief, but Lestat was already gone. He stopped short in the doorway, his hands over his ears. "They're coming," he whispered, and then, turning just so he could see me, he said, "Take him, for God's sake." The old man never knew what happened. He never awoke from his stupor. I bled him just enough, opening the gash so he would then die without feeding my dark passion. That thought I couldn't bear. I knew now it wouldn't matter if the body was found in this manner, because I had had enough of Point du Lac and Lestat and all this identity of Point du Lac's prosperous master. I would torch the house and turn to the wealth I'd held under many names, safe for just such a moment. Meantime, Lestat was after the enslaved. He would leave such ruin and death behind him no one could make a story of that night at Point du Lac, and I went with him. As before, his ferocity was mysterious, but now I bared my fangs on the humans who fled from me, my steady advance overcoming their clumsy, pathetic speed as the veil of death descended or the veil of madness. The power and the proof of the vampire was incontestable, so that the slaves were scattered in all directions, and it was I who ran back up the steps to put the torch to Point du Lac. Lestat came bounding after me. "What are you doing?" he shouted. "Are you mad?" But there was no way to put out the flames. "They're gone, and you're destroying it, all of it." He turned around and around in the magnificent parlor amid his fragile splendor. "Get your coffin out. You have 3 hours till dawn," I said. The house was a funeral pyre. "Could the fire have hurt you?" asked the boy. "Most definitely," said the vampire. "Did you go back to the oratory? Was it safe?" "No, not at all. Some 55 enslaved were scattered across the grounds. Many of them would not have desired the life of a runaway, and would most certainly go right to Frenier or south to the Beljardin plantation down the river. I had no intention of staying there that night, but there was little time to go anywhere else." "The woman, Babette," said the boy. The vampire smiled. "Yes, I went to Babette. She lived now at Frenier with her young husband. I had enough time to load my coffin into the carriage and go to her." "But what about Lestat?" The vampire sighed. "Lestat went with me. It was his intention to go on to New Orleans, and he was trying to persuade me to do just that. But when he saw I meant to hide at Frenier, he opted for that also. We might not have ever made it to New Orleans. It was growing light, not so that mortal eyes would have seen it, but Lestat and I could see it." I love the story with Babette. Now as for Babette, I had visited her once again. As I told you, she had scandalized the coast by remaining alone on the plantation without a man in the house, without even an older woman. Babette's greatest problem was that she might succeed financially only to suffer the isolation of social ostracism. She had such a sensibility that wealth itself meant nothing to her. Family, a line, this meant something to Babette. Though she was able to hold the plantation together, the scandal was wearing on her. She was giving up inside. I came to her one night in the garden. Not permitting her to look on me, I told her in the most gentle voice that I was the same person she'd seen before, that I knew of her life and her suffering. "Don't expect people to understand it," I told her. "They are fools. They want you to retire because of your brother's death. They would use your life as if it were merely oil for a proper lamp. You must defy them, but you must defy them with purity and confidence." She was listening all the while in silence. I told her she was to give a ball for a cause, and the cause to be religious. She might pick a convent in New Orleans, anyone, and plan for a philanthropic ball. She would invite her deceased mother's dearest friends to be her chaperones, and she would do all of this with perfect confidence. Above all, perfect confidence. It was confidence and purity which were all important. Well, Babette thought this to be a stroke of genius. "I don't know who you are or what you are, and you will not tell me," she said. This was true. I would not. "But I can only think that you are an angel." And she begged to see my face. That is, she begged in the manner of such people as Babette, who are not given to truly begging anyone for anything. Not that Babette was proud. She was simply strong and honest, which in most cases makes begging... "I see you want to ask me a question," the vampire stopped. "Oh, no," said the boy, who had meant to hide it. "But you mustn't be afraid to ask me anything. If I held something too close..." And when the vampire said this, his face darkened for an instant. He frowned, and as his brows drew together, a small well appeared in the flesh of his forehead over his left brow, as though someone had pressed it with a finger. It gave him a peculiar look of deep distress. "If I held something too close for you to ask about it, I would not bring it up in the first place," he said. The boy found himself staring at the vampire's eyes, at the eyelashes, which were fine black wires in the tender flesh of the lids. "Ask me," he said to the boy. "Babette, the way you speak of her," said the boy, "as if your feeling was special." "Did I give you the impression I could not feel?" asked the vampire. "No, not at all. Obviously you felt for the old man. You stayed to comfort him when you were in danger. And what you felt for young Frenier when Lestat wanted to kill him, all this you explained. But I was wondering, did you have a special feeling for Babette? Was it feeling for Babette all along that caused you to protect Frenier? You mean love, said the vampire. Why do you hesitate to say it? Because you spoke of detachment, said the boy. Do you think that angels are detached? Asked the vampire. The boy thought for a moment. Yes, he said. But aren't angels capable of love? Asked the vampire. Don't angels gaze upon the face of God with complete love? The boy thought for a moment. Love, or adoration, he said. What is the difference? Asked the vampire thoughtfully. What is the difference? It was clearly not a riddle for the boy. He was asking himself. Angels feel love and pride, the pride of the fall and hatred, the strong, overpowering emotions of detached persons in whom emotion and will are one, he said finally. He stared at the table now, as though he were thinking this over, was not entirely satisfied with it. I had for Babette a strong feeling. It is not the strongest I've ever known for a human being. He looked up at the boy. But it was very strong. Babette was to me in her own way an ideal human being. He shifted in his chair, the cape moving softly about him, and turned his face to the windows. The boy bent forward and checked the tape. Then he took another cassette from his briefcase and, begging the vampire's pardon, fitted it into place. I'm afraid I did ask something too personal. I didn't mean, he said anxiously to the vampire. You ask me nothing of the sort, said the vampire, looking at him suddenly. It is a question right to the point. I feel love, and I felt some measure of love for Babette, though not the greatest love I've ever felt. It was foreshadowed in Babette. To return to my story, Babette's charity ball was a success and her re-entry into social life assured by it. Her money generously underwrote any doubts in the minds of her suitors' families, and she married. On summer nights I used to visit her, never letting her see me or know that I was there. I came to see that she was happy, and seeing her happy, I felt a happiness as the result. And to Babette I came now with Lestat. He would have killed the Freniers long ago if I hadn't stopped him, and he thought now that was what I meant to do. And what peace would that bring? I asked. You call me the idiot, and you've been the idiot all along. Do you think I don't know why you made me a vampire? You couldn't live by yourself. You couldn't manage even the simplest things. For years now I've managed everything while you sat about making a pretense of superiority. There's nothing left for you to tell me about life. I have no need of you and no use for you. It's you who need me, and if you touch but one of the Frenier enslaved, I'll get rid of you. It will be a battle between us, and I needn't point out to you I have more wit to fare better in my little finger than you in your entire frame. Do as I say. Well, this startled him, though it shouldn't have, and he protested he had much to tell me, of things and types of people I might kill who would have sudden death, and places in the world I must never go, and so forth and so on. Nonsense that I could hardly endure. But I had no time for him. The overseer's lights were lit at Frenier. He was trying to quell the excitement of the runaway enslaved in his own, and the fire of Point du Lac could be seen still against the sky. Babette was dressed and attending to business, having sent carriages to Point du Lac and enslaved to help fight the blaze. The frightened runaways were kept away from the others, and at that point no one regarded their stories as any more than enslaved foolishness. Babette knew something dreadful had happened and suspected murder, never the supernatural. She was in the study making a note of the fire in the plantation diary when I found her. It was almost morning. I had only a few minutes to convince her she must help. I spoke to her at first, refusing to let her turn around, and calmly she listened. I told her I must have a room for the night, to rest. I've never brought you harm. I ask you now for a key, and your promise that no one will try to enter that room until tonight. Then I'll tell you all. I was nearly desperate now. The sky was paling. Lestat was yards off in the orchard with the coffins. "But why have you come to me tonight?" she asked. "And why not to you?" And why not to you?" I replied. "Did I not help you at the very moment when you needed guidance, when you alone stood strong among those who are dependent and weak? Did I not twice offer you good counsel? And haven't I watched over your happiness ever since?" I could see the figure of Lestat at the window. He was in a panic. "Give me the key to a room. Let no one come near till it's nightfall. I swear to you I would never bring you harm." "And if I don't? If I believe you come from the devil," she said now, and meant to turn her head. I reached for the candle and put it out. She saw me standing with my back to the graying windows. "If you don't, and if you believe me to be the devil, I shall die," I said. "Give me the key. I could kill you now if I chose, do you see?" And now I moved close to her and showed myself to her more completely, so that she gasped and drew back, holding to the arm of her chair. "But I would not. I would die rather than kill you. I will die if you don't give me such a key as I ask." It was accomplished. What she thought, I don't know. But she gave me one of the ground floor storage rooms where wine was aged, and I am sure that she saw Lestat and me bringing the coffins. I not only locked the door, but barricaded it. Lestat was up the next evening when I awoke. "Then she kept her word?" "Yes, only she had gone a step farther. She had not only respected our locked door, she had locked it again from without." "And the stories of the enslaved, she'd heard them?" "Yes, she had. Lestat was the first to discover we were locked in. However, he became furious. He had planned to get to New Orleans as fast as possible. He was now completely suspicious of me. "I only needed you as long as my father lived," he said, desperately trying to find some opening somewhere. The place was a dungeon. "Now I won't put up with anything from you, I warn you." He didn't even wish to turn his back on me. I sat there straining to hear voices in the rooms above, wishing that he would shut up, not wishing to confide for a moment my feeling for Babette or my hopes. I was also thinking something else. You ask me about feeling and detachment. One of its aspects, detachment with feeling, I should say, is that you can think of two things at the same time. You can think that you are not safe and may die, and you can think of something very abstract and remote, and this was definitely so with me. I was thinking at that moment wordlessly and rather deeply how sublime friendship between Lestat and me might have been, how few impediments to it there would have been, and how much to be shared. Perhaps it was the closeness of Babette which caused me to feel it. For how could I truly ever come to know Babette except, of course, through one final way, to take her life, to become one with her in an embrace of death when my soul would become one with her heart and nourished with it. But my soul wanted to know Babette without my need to kill, without robbing her of every breath, every drop of blood. But Lestat, how we might have known each other, had he not been a man of character, a man of even a little thought. The old man's words came back to me. Lestat, a brilliant pupil, a lover of books that had been burned. I knew only the Lestat who sneered at my library, called it a pile of dust, ridiculed relentlessly my reading, my meditations. I became aware now that the house over our heads was quieting. Now and then feet moved and the boards creaked in the light, and the cracks of the boards gave a faint, uneven illumination. I could see Lestat feeling along the brick walls, his hard, enduring vampire face a twisted mask of human frustration. I was confident we must part ways at once, that I must, if necessary, put an ocean between us, and I realized that I'd tolerated him this long because of self-doubt. I'd fooled myself into believing I stayed for the old man and for my sister and her husband, but I stayed with Lestat because I was afraid. He did know essential secrets as a vampire, which I did not discover alone, and, more important, because he was the only one of my kind whom I knew. He had never told me how he had become a vampire, or where I might find a single other member of our kind. This troubled me greatly then, as much as it had for 4 years. I hated him and wanted to leave him. Yet, could I leave him? Meantime, as all this passed through my thoughts, Lestat continued his diatribe. He didn't need me. He wasn't going to put up with anything, especially not any threat from the Freniers. We had to be ready when the door opened. Remember, he said to me finally, speed and strength, they cannot match us in that. And fear, remember always to strike fear. Don't be sentimental now. You'll cost us everything. You wish to be on your own after this? I asked him. I wanted him to say it. I did not have the courage, or rather, I did not know my own feelings. I want to get to New Orleans, he said. I was simply warning you I don't need you, but to get out of here, we need each other. You don't begin to know how to use your powers. You have no innate sense of what you are. Use your persuasive powers with this woman if she comes, but if she comes with others, then be prepared to act like what you are. Which is what? I asked him, because it had never seemed such a mystery to me as it did at that time. What am I? He was openly disgusted. He threw up his hands. Be prepared, he said, now baring his magnificent teeth. To kill. He looked suddenly at the boards overhead. They're going to bed up there. Do you hear them? After a long silent time during which Lestat paced and I sat there musing, plumbing my mind for what I might do or say to Babette, or, deeper still, for the answer to a harder question, what did I feel for Babette? After a long time a light flared beneath the door. Lestat was poised to jump whoever should open it. It was Babette alone, and she entered with a lamp, not seeing Lestat, who stood beside her, but looking directly at me. I had never seen her as she looked then. Her hair was down for bed, a mass of dark waves behind her white dressing gown, and her face was tight with worry and fear. This gave it a feverish radiance and made her large brown eyes all the more huge. As I have told you, I loved her strength and honesty, the greatness of her soul, and I did not feel passion for her as you would feel it. But I found her more alluring than any woman I'd ever known in mortal life. Even in the severe dressing gown, her arms and breasts were round and soft, and she seemed to me an intriguing soul clothed in rich, mysterious flesh. I, who am hard and spare and dedicated to a purpose, felt drawn to her irresistibly, and knowing it could only culminate in death. I turned away from her at once, wondering if when she gazed into my eyes she found them dead and soulless. You are the one who came to me before, she said now, as if she hadn't been sure. And you are the owner of Point du Lac. You are. I knew as she spoke that she must have heard the wildest stories of last night, and there would be no convincing her of any lie. I had used my unnatural appearance twice to reach her, to speak to her. I could not hide it or minimize it now. I mean you no harm, I said to her. I need only a carriage and horses, the horses I left last night in the pasture. She didn't seem to hear my words. She drew closer, determined to catch me in the circle of her light. And then I saw Lestat behind her, his shadow merging with her shadow on the brick wall. He was anxious and dangerous. You will give me the carriage? I insisted. She was looking at me now, the lamp raised, and just when I meant to look away I saw her face change. It went still, blank, as if her soul were losing its consciousness. She closed her eyes and shook her head. It occurred to me that I somehow caused her to go into a trance without any effort on my part. What are you? She whispered. You're from the devil. You were from the devil when you came to me. The devil, I answered her. This distressed me more than I thought it would be, more than I thought I could be distressed. If she believed this, then she would think my counsel bad. She would question herself. Her life was rich and good, and I knew she mustn't do this. Like all strong people, she suffered always a measure of loneliness. She was a marginal outsider, a secret infidel of a certain sort, and the balance by which she lived might be upset if she were to question her own goodness. She stared at me with undisguised horror. It was as if in horror she forgot her own vulnerable position. And now Lestat, who was drawn to weakness like a parched man to water, grabbed her wrist, and she screamed and dropped the lamp. The flames leapt in the splattered oil, and Lestat pulled her backwards towards the open door. You get the carriage, he said to her. Get it now, and the horses. You are in mortal danger. Danger. Don't talk of devils. I stomped on the flames and went for Lestat, shouting to him to leave her. He had her by both wrists, and she was furious. You'll rouse the house if you don't shut up, he said to me. And I'll kill her. Get the carriage. Lead us. Talk to the stable boy, he said to her, pushing her into the open air. We moved slowly across the dark court, my distress almost unbearable, Lestat ahead of me, and before us both Babette, who moved backwards, her eyes peering at us in the dark. Suddenly she stopped. One dim light burned in the house above. I'll get you nothing, she said. I reached for Lestat's arm and told him I must handle this. She'll reveal us to everyone unless you let me talk to her, I whispered to him. One moment. My nose is starting to run again from the cold. Winter is here. It's also so cold in my room right now. Oh my god. Anyway, we continue. Then get yourself in check, he said disgustedly. Be strong. Don't quibble with her. You go as I talk. Go to the stables and get the carriage and the horses, but don't kill. Whether he'd obey me or not, I didn't know, but he darted away just as I stepped up to Babette. Her face was a mixture of fury and resolution. She said, Get thee behind me, Satan! And I stood there before her then, speechless, just holding her in my glance as surely as she held me. If she could hear Lestat in the night, she gave no indication. Her hatred for me burned like fire. Why do you say this to me? I asked. Was the counsel I gave you bad? Did I do you harm? I came to help you, to give you strength. I thought only of you when I had no need to think of you at all. She shook her head. But why? Why do you talk to me like this? She asked. I know what you've done to Point du Lac. You lived there like a devil. The enslaved were wild with stories. All day men have been on the river road on the way to Point du Lac. My husband was there. He saw the house in ruins, the bodies of enslaved throughout the orchards, the fields. What are you? Why do you speak to me gently? What do you want of me? She clung now to the pillars of the porch and was backing slowly to the staircase. Something moved above in the lighted window. I cannot give you such answers now, I said to her. Believe me when I tell you I came to you only to do you good, and would not have brought worry and care to you that last night for anything had I the choice. The vampire stopped. The boy sat forward, his eyes wide. The vampire was frozen, staring off, lost in his thoughts, his memory. And the boy looked down suddenly, as if this were the respectful thing to do. He glanced again at the vampire, and then again, away, his own face as distressed as the vampire's. And then he started... Sorry, I got a tickle in my throat. One moment. Excuse me. Oh my goodness. The vampire turned... Oh goodness, let me cough for a second. One second. Ay. Sorry. I swallowed my spit wrong. Jeez. Oh god. Nobody judge me. Anyway. The vampire turned towards him and studied him so that the boy flushed and looked away anxiously. But then he raised his eyes and looked into the vampire's eyes. He swallowed, but he held the vampire's gaze. Is this what you want? The vampire whispered. Is this what you wanted to hear? He moved the chair back soundlessly and walked to the window. The boy sat as if stunned, looking at his broad shoulders and the long mass of the cape. The vampire turned his head lightly. You don't answer me. I'm not giving you what you want, am I? You wanted an interview, something to broadcast on the radio. That doesn't matter. I'll throw the tapes away if you want, the boy rose. I can't say I understand all you're telling me. You'd know if I was lying if I said I did. So how can I ask you to go on except to say what I do understand? What I do understand is like nothing I've ever understood before. He took a step towards the vampire. The vampire appeared to be looking down into Divisadero Street. Then he turned his head slowly and looked at the boy and smiled. His face was serene and almost affectionate, and the boy suddenly felt uncomfortable. He shoved his hands into his pocket and turned towards the table. Then he laughed. Then he looked at the vampire tentatively and said, "Will you please go on?" All right. This is where I have the stopping point for tonight anyway. So, of course, I have a coughing fit right at the end. I apologize, everybody. However, like I said previously, the edition I have isn't really broken up into chapters. So I figured if we're doing the same amount every time, that's about where we would stop anyway. So we're at like a very dramatic part. However, I love the way the scenes with Babette are described, and I wish desperately they had been fleshed out on screen. I think it would have been so dramatic, and I think that it would have been such a, I don't know, especially in the film with Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt. I really think like this would have been fascinating, and I think that Tom Cruise's portrayal of Lestat in this would have been very fitting, because Tom Cruise was very like pretentious and uppity, I feel. You know what I mean? The feeling when your body betrays you back. I know, I was like, of course, right at the end. But anyway. Also, too, my nose is running. It's very cold. It's just one of those nights, you know. Nobody judge me. Let's see, in the mass market paperback. Yes, stopping at the top of page 68. Yep, that's exactly where we're stopping. I figured that was a good point right there. So if you're reading the mass market paperback, like Kay Shannara said, we're stopping there for the evening. I'm so glad that you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for being here. Louis, I think, is just so desperate for real connection at this point. I absolutely agree with you. You know, and for anyone who read this book and stopped and did not read any of the others, a lot of people that I've spoken to have only read this book. They're like, you know, oh, I can't stand Lestat. You know, he's so pretentious. And, you know, he is described as like the brat prince, of course. However, the context you get in The Vampire Lestat, the book, I think it adds such a depth to his character, and like learning about his childhood, it doesn't absolve him, obviously, of all the things that he does and says and all of the malarkey he puts Louis through in this book, obviously. However, I do think it's very sad, and I can be sympathetic to Louis, that, you know, Lestat really only turned him because I think, I don't know, I think it was one part desperation, one part, you know, like wanting to have somewhere to put his father, obviously, you know, like his hospice father, essentially. But also, too, I think that, you know, for those of you who read The Vampire Lestat, I think he was looking for a companion who was soulful and, like, thoughtful, similar to Nikki, and that's all I'm going to say. That would be my opinion. Yes, and I do agree. Lestat does grow so much in the other books. And you know what's interesting, too, is I think that, especially in The Tale of the Body Thief, I think that Lestat grows significantly. Like, it's like his frontal lobe develops, you know what I mean? Like, I think that he gains a new level to understanding, and you see a lot of humanity come to him in The Vampire Lestat that you don't see in this book, obviously, because it is told from Louis and the interviewer's perspective. So, I definitely need to reread the whole series. Well, listen, if you stick around, I do plan to read through all these books. Granted, it is once a week, obviously, but you know, if you want to reread them and go ahead and this is kind of like book club, we can chat about it every Monday. I would love to do that, because I do intend to. I would like to go through and try to read them all. You know, essentially, like we did a couple years ago. Now we did this. I think we got up to, what did we get to, guys? We got to the Vampire Armand, I think, right? We were pretty far. And then just life happened, you know. But I do intend to go back to them, especially because I love Queen of the Damned, obviously, but The Tale of the Body Thief is probably one of my favorite ones. Oh, we also read, hang on, what is it called? Oh, God. It's slipping my mind. The one about the, is he a demon? Is he a demon? He's like a fallen angel. I forget his name. Ugh, it's gonna plague me. it was the last book that we were reading, because we read The Vampire Armand and then we read the other one as well. But I think in that one too, that one's a little dramatic. That one does talk about like God and, you know, Lestat drinking the blood of Jesus, which is very, very dramatic in my. It's very dramatic. However, it's very fascinating. Memnoch the Devil. Thank you, darling. Yes, Memnoch the Devil. I thought that was a fantastic book. However, very dramatic. We ended up finishing on that one, I believe. Yeah, things are very, very bizarre in Memnoch. I do agree. I remember reading that with you guys, and I hadn't read it in years. I hadn't read it probably since I was like 16 or 17. And I'm reading it, and I remember just like reading a passage and then looking and being like, this is the most insane thing I think I've ever read in my whole life. But it was fascinating kind of going through and doing a little bit of research on what Anne Rice was going through at that time, because I know like she, I don't know if the right word to say is struggled, but I think she kind of went back and forth with like her faith and her belief and things like that. And I think that Memnoch was really a tale of her coming to terms with like death and how to explain it in her own way, and also like the grief of losing her husband. You know, it was very interesting how she was kind of like fleshing it out, and that it shows like her personal development with like spirituality and how to deal with the grief of losing, you know, your soulmate essentially. It's a very, very good read. It's a very, very good read. I agree. Yes. See, Chelsea, you understand. You can definitely tell where she was at. And a crisis of faith is a good way to put it too. It makes sense that Lestat is like that, because the literal devil comes to him and says, "You are my chosen one." Like, exactly. How would you react to that? I don't know how I would react to that. I think I would be gobsmacked. I'd be like, I mean, isn't there someone else you can call? Jeez Louise. You know what I mean? But yes, I agree. The way that she portrayed it with, you know, she talked about like, the singing and the sounds and everything like that. It was just very fascinating. And I also love the imagery of the statue, of, you know, Memnoch coming to life, like this like obsidian statue. It was just, it's something I wish would be fleshed out on screen. But also, too, it's one of those things that I almost feel like, now hear me out, not so much an anime, but I think something of that magnitude, because of the day and age that we're in, would almost be better animated, because I think that the depth of it could be artistically portrayed a little bit better than someone trying to do like an AI or CGI, you know, interpretation of this book. I really think that there would be so much more depth if it was like drawn out, if that makes sense. But that's my personal opinion. I just think that some of our favorite novels like this, when it comes to, you know, creatures and angels and demons and things like that, you almost can't capture it unless it's like how Guillermo del Toro does it. You know what I mean? Where it's, like real prosthetics and things like that. Or a graphic novel. Yes. Castlevania style animation. I 100% agree with you. I just think that it captures this like, profoundly like, I don't know, this like deep artistic rendition. And I think, you know, Castlevania is one of those as well, where it like moves me because the art is so detailed. But I think something like, especially like Memnoch the Devil, you could not portray it in live action. Like it just, I think it would just flop and it would be such a disappointment. And I feel the same about, even like The Vampire Armand. I think that's something like that book too, it's one of my favorites. I think that would have to be probably animated. And I think that even The Queen of the Damned too, because of just, it's set in ancient times. And I think that, you know, to accurately convey it, it would be beautiful as art. I think having someone actually draw that out and it be done like in a very like, I don't know, just artistic way. That's my opinion though. I'm so sick of people being like, oh, we're gonna interpret this into a book, and then it's like the crappiest thing you've ever seen. You know what I mean? So that's how I feel about it. Honestly, oh my God, could you imagine if Del Toro did Interview with the Vampire? I would like lose my mind. I couldn't even imagine. if something like that happened, or even if he was doing it, I could see it being incredible. You know what I mean? And I think that he's so passionate about things like that it would give it the kind of artistic life that I'm looking for. But again, I think it would need to be animated to be portrayed accurately. So, I just remembered we have is it the third episode? I think it's, no. Is it the third episode or is it the fourth episode? I think the fourth episode of, the Talamasca show was last night. So I think we're going to watch that tonight. Is anybody watching that, by the way? It's off of Anne Rice's, obviously off of her works. But the Talamasca television show that just came out is very good. Very, very good. Intersects with the Interview with the Vampire, television show. And I think also is a wonderful segue into the Vampire Lestat television show. So like, I'm really excited for that. I'm so excited for that. Also too, I do enjoy that the vibe is more of like a, I don't know, dare I say murder mystery as opposed to like, I don't know, Interview with the Vampire. Anytime somebody's like, how would you describe it? I would just play them the scene where Lestat's like, I heard your heart's dancing. Like, it's so, I don't know, like over the top dramatic. Whereas I don't feel like Talamasca is as dramatic. I think it's more, it's like, it's just a different vibe. It's like a different genre, if that makes sense. Yes, it is on AMC Plus. So unfortunately you do have to have a subscription on that. But I think maybe your Prime subscription would work with it too. Or I think. Hang on, let's see. Having it animated, I think, would really help with the capturing the surreal nature of them. Yes, I totally agree. Yes, and Cayman, yes, I agree with you absolutely. And also too, like, you know, how the inception of Maharet and like her people and things like that living out in the caves. I just think it would be so beautiful if it was done in like an art form as opposed to live action, me personally. And like the magic of it, because, you know, again, not to poo-poo on anybody who likes stuff with like magic that's live action by any means. I just find that sometimes it can come off as like borderline tacky when you do magic in film. And I would hate for that to happen, you know, especially because with like Maharet's people, like the elements and everything like that are really tied into it. And I think it would just be so tacky to portray that in live action, but that's just me. Let's see. Oh, why does it keep doing that? Go away from me. There we go. Prime or Netflix, but it takes a while. I say. Let's see. I was bored of it in last night's episode, and then I wasn't. Okay. Oh God. All right. I'm gonna trust you, Princess, because I feel like you have very, very good taste in film and cinema, so I trust you completely. But I'm a sucker for Anne Rice's body of work, so I'll watch anything. I don't care if it's a snooze fest. I'm just gonna be like, all right, well, on to the next episode, I suppose. You know what I mean? Let's see. Prince of Egypt animators would be fabulous for that. I totally agree. Yes, because Prince of Egypt is also one of those films too where like the score for the music was like, oh my God, it was unbelievable. And the art style of it was unbelievable too. And it brings like such a, I don't know, like an emotional depth to it. That's what I'm looking for. Let's see, tacky, like Now You See Me. Yes, like that. You know what I mean? But more so, I wasn't a huge fan of the Mayfair Witches. I know it's a poo-poo because it's Anne Rice too, but I think that's not down to Anne Rice's writing because I enjoyed the books. I really didn't like the TV show, but it was like that's kind of what I'm insinuating. You know what I mean, like that kind of thing. Let's see. I need to catch up with the show. You have to. I'm sorry. You really have to. If you ever get a chance to, even if it's just like you can watch like I don't know, like one episode a week. You know what I mean? If you haven't seen the Interview with the Vampire series, listen, it is graphic and it is not something that if you have children, that is like they go to bed and like you lock yourself in your bedroom and you don't let anybody hear that you're watching it because it's very, very graphic and it's, you know, inherently sexual in nature, of course, absolutely. But I just think it's that's a grown-up TV show. Like you have to be in the right place because it's like you're exposing yourself to trauma too. You know what I mean? So you got to be in a good state when you're watching that, because there's a lot of like themes of domestic violence and things like that. Rowan holding her hand out. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Somebody else has seen that show. Yes. The way that they portrayed her relationship with Lasher, I just, because it was so good in the book. Like, for those of you who are passionate about the books, oh my God, you know what I'm saying? Like, it was just a different vibe in the books, especially with Lasher. Disappointing. So that's no shade to the books, obviously. I really wasn't a fan of the TV show. My husband and I, we watched it, and we would look at each other after the episode finished, and we'd be like, oh, God. We didn't even finish the show. I was just like, God, I can't do this. And also, I really didn't like how they portrayed the main character, too. Sorry. It could have been done a little bit better. Anyway. I also can't wait for... oh my God, you only saw the first season? Oh God. The second season, it hurts. It's painful. The second season's very painful. So just be forewarned, it hurts. It hurts really bad. I still think about it. I can't wait for Rockstar Lestat as well. I have to watch it. I need to convince my boyfriend to watch it with me. Yes, I highly suggest. It's a good show to watch with somebody else, because you can like look at them when something dramatic happens and you're like, oh my God, you know. So, I really like how they delved into Armand's psychic powers in the show, especially now. Oh my God, I know. Yes, that was like, and has anyone heard about the fan theory about Daniel's first wife? Was her name Annie? It was something like that, I believe. Also, I'm shivering. It's so cold. I said Annie? It doesn't matter. There's a theory that Armand was, technically who this woman was supposedly, with like the scar on her eyebrow and everything. Or like, not the scar, like her eyebrow was like dyed a certain color. Alice, whoever it is, it's an A name. Whoever it is, Alice, yeah. There's a theory that it's actually Armand. And because he manipulated his mind so much, like he imprinted that into his mind, and that's why Armand knew, like, she wanted to say yes and things like that, because Armand actually wanted to turn him back then. I don't know. It's very dramatic, and I love reading fan fiction. So if you can find that out there, it's a very interesting theory. But Alice, yeah. I need to get... Oh, God, I know. Yeah, definitely catch up, because I think that you're going to be like, oh my God, I know. Thank you, Henry. I know. I heard it and I was just like, what if? Because don't you get the vibe a little bit, like, especially if you watch the second season, obviously, don't you get the vibe a little bit that like Armand, it's like a cat and mouse thing. Not necessarily that he was in love with Daniel in the television show, but I think that it was like the control and domination that he was in love with. Do you know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? Are there bones in that guitar case? I don't know. Maybe. No, there's not. I don't even know if there's a guitar in it. I think the guitar is actually hanging in our living room. But I just thought it was very fascinating that people suggested that Armand was actually Alice. So if you can find that on the fan fiction section of the internet, I think you're gonna have your mind blown of like, oh my God, like what if? And all that deep manipulation he was doing to Daniel was actually him being in like a years long like relationship with Daniel. Fascinating. There's a Les Paul in there. Oh, there's a Les Paul in there. There you go. So, but anyway, I won't keep you all. I'm going to go and watch the 4th episode of Talamasca, and we can discuss it next week. So I hope you guys watch that as well, because I'd love to chat with you all about it. I believe it is on AO3, and also, too, like, that's where I read most of my fan fictions. And I end up divulging all of it to Dominic, of like, I read this on the fan fiction website, and this is what I think. Let's see. Is it only vampires you're doing? No werewolves? Listen, for a while I was doing 2 book nights. I was doing Vampire Book Club, and then I was doing like another one too. So if this goes well and you want to do another literature night, I used to do them on Wednesday nights too. I would love to do other things. I eventually would love to read Frankenstein because I'm on a Frankenstein kick right now because I just watched the new movie. So I would love to. So there's definitely nothing holding me back from doing that. But thank you all for being here. I love you guys very much. And if you want to come to next week, it will be every Monday night, like our dear friend Kay Shinara said. It will be every Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 6 p.m. Pacific. And we will pick up with Interview with the Vampire. And when we're finished, we're going to move on to the next one in the Anne Rice series. But I love you all. Have a wonderful night, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye, everybody.